Hello, 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 hello. Peace and many, many bliss. Peace and bliss, peace and bliss, peace and bliss. How are you all? I hope you guys are feeling amazing. I hope this day has you guys feeling inspired and empowered and desiring unconditional love. I hope you guys are enjoying this present moment, this beautiful now. Um, how are you guys? Please let me know as you guys come in. I hope you guys can hear me. I hope you guys can see me. I hope you guys are feeling loved. I hope you guys can feel my love for you all. Say hello as you guys come in so I know to who's in here and can say hello back. Tiffany, Letitia, peace and beautiful bliss to you queens. I hope you guys are having an awesome, inspired, empowered day. Um, so really, really quickly, I wanted to just talk to you guys on today based on something that has been on my mind that I believe Spirit has wanted me to go on live and just kind of um, dive a little bit into understanding the dichotomy of our spiritual growth. And I feel like a lot of star seeds are in a place of spiritual stagnation because they just simply don't know what's next on their journey, and I believe that once people can understand how, maybe just kind of shed some light on what this journey looks like, and I can only speak from my point of view, although I do realize that I am a messenger from the Galactic Federation, so most of the stuff that I do speak is for multiple star seeds. And so, Danae, or Danny, I hope I'm saying that right. Tiffany, peace and blessings, peace and bliss to you guys all on this beautiful day. Um, so I wanted to talk to you guys all on a little bit of my own personal journey, but on this journey, I wanted to kind of explain what I believe the difference is between being awake and being awakened. Because during my journey, there were times where I thought I was awakened, and I really was only just awake. And then even once I became awakened, um, I I wasn't really activated. And so to me, I feel like there are like three stages on this ascension cycle for each individual, and you have the awake, the awakened, and the activation. And so Marlena, Elijah, Alicia, Eden, Sabrina, peace and bliss on you guys on this beautiful morning. And so for me personally, I only became awakened maybe about 6 months ago. However, your awakened state is a period of exponential evolution. And so a lot of people think that I've been on my journey for a very long period of time, and that's what lets me know that I've awakened. Since my awakening, I've taken quantum leaps in my self-evolutionary journey. I have unlocked the other side of my brain, which allows my creativity to stimulate itself exponentially, while also stimulating my divine masculine energy that creates the structure, order, and rules that allow me to anchor in the things that I'm creating. Um, and so, kind of just explaining a little bit on my own spiritual journey, and hoping that anyone who may feel called to connect with this, please do so. This message is for someone, multiple people, including myself. So thank you for sharing space in this moment. Luke, peace and bliss, my brother. How are you today? Hope London is doing well. T, how are you, Queen? Hope you're doing well. And so yeah, so my journey started off at about I'd probably say March of last year, and my journey started off with my first peyote ceremony. During this time, I was completely uh, infatuated with the Babylonian world, with the 3D matrix. I was heavily attached to money. I was living in a six-figure household between me and my wife. I had all the finest, the fancy things. Had two new cars, two 70-inch TVs in my house, $1,300, excuse me, no, $4,000 bed, $3,000 couch. Just really, really enjoying life in the physical realm. And as I was also heavily involved in Christianity. I was a youth pastor growing up, and so I had a very, very deep foundation when it came to scripture. And so that was my life at one point. And, it seemed like for me, I felt this call, as if my spirit was calling out to my vessel. And, I kind of just started taking this transition, looking back on it. I started questioning my religion. I started seeing inconsistencies. I mean, we've all been through this part where we, especially those who grew up in a spiritual background, we reached that transition point where we just start seeing inconsistency with what's being spoken and, what's actually being carried out and followed through on. For me personally, just seeing the unconditional love, just seeing how unconditional love was preached versus seeing how a very conditionally loving God in the Bible, that was my shifting point for me consciously. I just kept looking at myself, especially when I became a father. I started looking at how I viewed children, and I've always viewed children the same. But the biggest turning point for me on my journey was when I asked myself, if my daughter grew up and said she didn't love me or said she didn't want anything to do with me, would I send my daughter to hell for all eternity? And the answer was no, obviously, right? And so I asked myself, then why would an unconditionally loving God, who's supposed to love more unconditionally than even myself, why would he do that to his children if I wouldn't even do that to my child? And so that was like the breaking question for me that really kickstarted my spiritual journey. And so I ended up having my first peyote ceremony at a Native American church in New Haven, Missouri. And that was where everything kind of shifted for me. That was when I kind of saw life for what it truly was. I saw that the path that I was going on wasn't a path that was serving my highest good. And so I wanted to state all of that because that was the beginning of my awake stage. That was the beginning of my beginning. And so that was like the warming up before you start the race. And so throughout that year, when I went back home to my wife and my child, Spirit called me and was like communicating to me that it's time for me. I have to leave them and I have to go and start my spiritual journey. And so I was in a state of mind where I just completely disassociated myself from everything. I quit my job. I sold all of my possessions. I ended up divorcing my wife. Her and I were on different frequencies at that time anyway, so every conversation was an argument. And I realized that if I was to truly show my daughter how to be the best version of herself, then I could not do that unless I was the best version of myself. And so I knew I had to leave for a small period of time so I can become the best version of myself, so I can give her that point of reference. And so that's what started my spiritual journey. And so I gave all my possessions away. I moved to Missouri, and I kind of just started backpacking through to intentional communities, off-grid communities, because I realized that I was enslaved in the 3D matrix. And so I realized that the only way for me to truly be free is to be sustainable to the point where I don't need anything externally to complete my internal state of being. And so that was my journey, and that was the beginning of my journey. And on that journey, many things were revealed to me. Again, during this time, I was only awake, and that's what I kind of want to communicate today, is that there are a lot of us who are awake, meaning that we see the world for how it really is. We see a better world that we may want to fit in. We just may not necessarily know what our role to play in that transition is. And a lot of us who are going through this awakening process are learning new things about themselves, but it's still very, very one-dimensional at this point. And so for myself, it wasn't until about 6 months after this time where at this point I had became a spiritual leader in the New Haven community, the Native American community. I was kind of holding space for people at the peyote ceremonies. I was no longer taking peyote. I was just facilitating other people and kind of just being a light worker in that space. And there was one particular day where I had fasted for 2 days leading up to the next peyote ceremony. And this was kind of when I was understanding my role as a magician and my role as an alchemist. I didn't quite know that I was an alchemist yet, but I did know that I had a natural ability to work in ceremonial magic. And so I started realizing energy flowed through my body anytime I got around a ceremony or got around large people. And there were always these opportunities for me to deliver a message to a large amount of people where people were instantly able to receive that message, and essentially almost like change their life based on the message that I spoke. And so I started realizing that I had that natural gift. And so on this particular day, I had fasted for 2 days up until this point, and I'm going to walk through this process leading up into this transition because this was when I actually awakened. And so I fasted for 2 days, and so my energies were extremely high that day. I still didn't eat on that day of. And then I ended up, during this ceremony, I ended up meeting this gentleman who I believe was one of my spirit guides. He was a doctor from Atlanta, and that was very peculiar because no one from Atlanta would travel out to Missouri, but this was one guy who chose to do so. And it's funny because the only reason why he came was because of a mutual female friend that he and I both knew, and so that kind of linked us together. And so we got into the ceremony, and he ends up actually like massaging my body. Like he ended up breaking my body down like bone by bone, and like just popped everything, got everything into an alignment. And it got to the point where like every time he got done working on one of my limbs, like my arm was like dead. Like I had like, it just was so relaxed. And I didn't realize that was also increasing my vibration. So on top of the fast, I ended up having this full body alignment adjustment that increased my vibrations even more. And so there was a fire outside, and I remember sitting down at the fire, and I laid my head down on this one of my friends, and she's kind of stroking my hair while we're listening to this music outside. And then the last thing that there was kind of a catalyst into this transition was my friend ended up giving me LSD. And so for those who don't know, energetically, what LSD actually does, that it takes all the energy that's in your body and actually charges it through your pineal gland. And so it reflects your state of consciousness. And so this was the catalyst that I needed to send me into my awakening. And so I had my fast, which increased my vibrations, the adjustment that increased my vibrations, my relaxed state, which increased my vibrations, and then the LSD sent me like overboard. And so I remember when I was laying down, I had my head on her lap, and I was just kind of in a very, very, very relaxed state. I mean, I was very aware of my breathing. I was kind of in a meditative state, and all of a sudden, this recording comes over, like the speakers that were playing outside, and it was the sound of like presidents and like government leaders that were basically, there have been times like basically someone put together this like montage of like voice recordings of like very, very powerful leaders who had like spoken like very, very evil things behind closed doors that were actually heard unrecorded. Like, you know, you heard like President Nixon talking about how he puts opioids in the water to drug us, and how they put fluoride, and how 9/11, all these things, and it's like a little montage you're just listening to, like where it's talking in one person's voice, and then it goes like, and then it switches to another person's voice, and they say some fucked up shit, and then you're. So I'm just listening to this as I have my head down. Rachel, Billie Jean, Taryn, Mahori, peace of many bliss. So I was listening to this, and I had my head down, and as I'm listening to this, I'm listening to it, but I'm not really hearing it. And so I guess I was hearing it, but not really listening to it. And so eventually, as I'm in this relaxed state, I start hearing this voice. And this voice was a woman's voice, and I'll never forget this. But it was like this older woman who was speaking to me, and like it sounded like a very, very static voice, but it was like she was saying, she was like, "You're in the matrix, and I'm trying to pull you out. If you just listen to my voice and follow my instruction." And so like she keeps repeating that, and I'm just listening. I'm thinking it's a part of the song, so I'm just sitting there like kind of like, okay, yeah. And then I stop for a moment, and like I actually listened to what she's saying, and I'm like, wait a minute, is there by any chance that she's talking to me? And then like when I asked that question in my head, she was like, yes. And I was like, holy fuck. So I shot my eyes open because I had my eyes closed, and I was like laying down. So I shot my eyes open, and this was like this was like my breaking point for me. So there was about 100 people at this peyote ceremony that I was at. And so when I shot my eyes open and like looked straight ahead, on everything I love, like I saw every single person at the ceremony was like had stopped, and was like just looking at me, like with the most blank face possible. Like there were people who were like, whose bodies were like faced this way, but their heads were like looking at me. And like everyone had stopped at the same time and they were looking at me. And I was just like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on? And so I jumped right up really quickly and I started looking around, and it's like what actually happened was, looking back on it in hindsight, I have broke my matrix. I have completely shattered all the 3D illusions building up until that point. And so kind of what I want to talk about is the process of actually awakening. In order to awaken, your chakras, all 7 of your chakras have to be open and activated, which was what I was doing prior to my 2-day fast. I had spent the last 4 months opening all of my chakras, separating myself from detachment, separating myself from illusions, separating myself from lies, separating myself from grief, all the way to shame, guilt, shame, guilt, grief, and then lastly, fear. So I had prepared myself unknowingly, unconsciously, preparing myself for this Kundalini awakening that I was just started experiencing. And so what happened was, how can I explain it? When you take LSD, again, your consciousness is inverted. So whatever thought frequency you're on, that is what will manifest to your material eyes. And so for me, I instantly got into a state of fear where I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, these people look sadistic as fuck. These people look evil as shit. And as I'm thinking these things, the clouds above me like start turning like bloodshot red, and I started seeing these demons all around me. And they were kind of like looking like they were angry at me, as if like they were angry that I shattered my matrix and was able to see them for who they truly were. And I was able to see people who had demons inside of them. And I remember getting this spark that was inside of me. And when the spark hit me, it was like this voice came in my head and was like, run. And so I remember like I got this like exciting feeling, and I just took off running. And I ran as fast as I could. And I wish I could show you guys, because I actually ended up running so fast that like I end up like skipping steps, and I end up doing like a front flip forward and like passing out. And so this was like a crazy event for me. And so when I woke up, I woke up and like there was this guy chasing after me, and he was like, hey brother, are you okay? And I get up and I'm looking around and I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And he was like, man, dude, like you were running, like I've never seen anyone run that fast before. And I actually have scratches all on my back from when I actually did this flip. And so I'm walking, and there was a church right outside of the gate that I had just flipped out of, almost symbolizing like me flipping out of hell. And this is where you start the loop. So a lot of people, when they have their awakening, they talk about this loop. And so I was walking, and telling me, get to the church. And so I was walking to the church, and I started asking myself, I was like, wait a minute, like, what if I'm still in that place that I just thought I left? And then when I did that, the person who was walking with me had like grabbed my hand, and like he had this like sadistic look on his face. And then I started thinking the thought, I was like, oh shit, am I in hell? And then as soon as I did that, I started seeing demons come up. And this was like the most tormenting experience I've ever had in my life, because I'm so glad I overcame it. But having to battle your demons is one of the most traumatic experiences you will ever have. In fact, while this was going on, I actually had a heart attack because my demons came all around me, and they put me in such a state of fear, and they tormented me that I actually passed out, and I actually left my body. And so it's like I would see these demons around me, they would grab me, they would torment me, and then I would like blink, and then I'd be like right back in the regular world. And I would get to the point where I'm like, okay, like, am I back? And then like, so the way that my demons would torment me is like, I feel like this is demons altogether. It's like they play tricks on you. So it's like they take the form of people you love most and people who are around you in that time. And then they basically try to confuse you on which realm of reality that you're in. So they'll have you thinking that you're like you're back in regular life and everything's back to normal, but really they're just like, you look at them and they're like snickering behind your back because they're looking like, yeah, we're tricking him again. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, getting back to normal. And then I started saying like, well, what if I'm not gone yet? Or, what if I'm still here? What if I'm still in this state? And then every time I did that, the demons would come back up, they grab me again, they torment me again. And like, it was just like seeing your loved ones being these sadistic, evil fucks and like being the ones that are actually enslaving you in hell. And so I went through this loop about 17 times, and it got to the point where I started losing my mind. It got to the point where I was like, so what I started realizing the demons were trying to get me to do is they were trying to get me to go back under the illusion again. So remember in the beginning I said that I broke my matrix. And so they were trying to convince me to like choose to go back under the illusion of fear again. And it was interesting because as I started transitioning my consciousness back into a fear-based consciousness, because I was at a point where I was losing my mind so much that I was saying, you know, I'd rather go back under the illusion of fear just so I can have a minute or a second of peace of mind, because I was so like losing my mind. I literally felt like I was going crazy. I felt like I was in this loop that I was never going to break out of. So I was like, you know what? I'll choose to act like none of this exists. If you guys can just put your regular faces back on, become the people that I know you as again, and just allow me to have a peace of mind. Yes, this was an ego death, Ashley. What? Was this my ego death? You know what? This kind of was my ego death, and I'm going to explain that in a second, because being a truly awakened being, your ego has to be up and running and very, very balanced. So anyways, I went through this loop around 17 times, and it got to the point where I started walking back under the illusion. And it's interesting because as I transitioned to falling back under the illusion, the demonic faces started becoming regular people again. And then right as I was about to choose like completely submit to the illusion again, I like stopped, and I was like, holy fuck. I was like, you know, I can't stop now. I was like, dude, I said, I will be paranoid for the rest of my life. I've seen these demons. I know they exist. They know that I exist. And so, and then I also see like who they're possessing. So it's like, I'm going to be looking at these people every day, knowing there's a demon inside them, knowing that they know me, but I'm having to keep my calm. So I was like going through that in my head, and I was like, as much as I want to turn back, I can't. And so I would go back through the loop again and experience like 5 more times, and then come back out of it and be like, fuck it, I'm done. Put the illusion back over me. And I get to the point where like right before it's going to happen again, and then I stop again. And so finally, right before I was about to go back under the loop again, something told me to place my hand over my heart. And when I did that, I felt how fast my heart was beating. And that's how I knew I was having a heart attack. And so literally, when I realized how much my heart was beating, I stopped and I tried to hold my breath for as long as I could. And then I just slowly decompressed and relaxed. And when I did that, I noticed that the clouds that were like bloodshot red had like started to fade away. And so then I remember taking another breath, and I remember seeing like some of the demons start like evaporating. And so I didn't know what was going on, but I was like, okay, something's working here. So at that point, I kind of just stopped. I was outside. I was on the ground. I just like stretched out flat and like laid on the ground and just started breathing. And looking back, I had to realize that breathing increases your vibration. So it's the only thing that allows your consciousness to rise out of those lower vibration realms. And so I was breathing. And so I began to feel like this burning sensation that was like on top of me. And then when I took another breath, it started like falling. I felt it under me as if I had like ascended over it. And so after that, I remember just closing my eyes and breathing. And, you know, I thought kind of like the worst part would be over it, but not really. It was kind of just like round 2. So like, and this wasn't really that bad because I broke out of the lower level of hell, which is fear. So the loop that I explained is a part of the Kundalini awakening. So when you experience your Kundalini, you have a coiled snake that is wrapped up in your sacral area. And then you have your divine masculine, which is like a serpent that is at the crown chakra area. And when your Kundalini journey begins, they begin to travel to each other, to meet each other, and then they consummate, and that's what stimulates your awakening. And so in order for the divine feminine snake to arise, she has to unravel. And so that unraveling is the loop that you go through as far as battling your demons. And so a lot of time that loop is different for everyone. For me, my coiled snake, that loop was 17 times, and I'll never forget that. But once I broke through that loop, I finally began to ascend. And so the next stage was my sacral chakra. Actually, I think I kind of went straight through my sacral chakra and went to my solar plexus chakra, because I I definitely started experiencing my past life deaths. And so this is what like kind of shifted me a little bit into neutrality, because I remember experiencing a past life where I was a fat white guy who died of cancer. I remember experiencing a past life where I was a white woman who jumped off a cliff and cracked her head open. I remember being a guy who was shot, held at gunpoint, and I had to relive all these experiences. And I just kept breathing. And then I remember experiencing all the times where I was a baby, where like I was able to hear all the different types of cries I've had in my previous lifetimes as newborn babies. And essentially I end up eventually reaching to the very top. So, if the lower part is obviously hell, when I got to the crown chakra, I had entered into, this blissful state of heaven, if you will. And so I remember when I came back, the first thing that I wanted to do was get naked. And I have no idea why I did this, but I took all my clothes off. And then I'm still at the ceremony. So this happened around 5 o'clock in the evening. When I finally came back to consciousness, it was about maybe 10 o'clock at night. So about 5 or 6 hours had gone by throughout this process. And so I'm kind of like back to like the 3D, like the regular Earth world, kind of. And so I took my clothes off, right? And and so I end up walking into the church, and finally end up getting to the church, and it's like a crowd full of people. And I remember I'm walking into the church and I'm butt ass naked, right? And so like everyone's looking at me and they're like, oh, okay. And so for the first time ever was the first time I ever heard the voice of God. And the first thing that it tells me, it says, there you are. And I'm like looking around like, who the fuck said that? And I couldn't see anybody that was like talking to me. And then when I in my mind, I was like, who said that? And then it said, there you are. And that's when I realized that there was this voice of consciousness that was like speaking through every living thing that was in the room. So it was like there was a dog in the room. There were multiple people. There were trees in the like plants. And I was like looking at like a plant, and I saw the plant like start the response off. And then the voice would go through like everybody in the room and like end with the dog, and the dog would finish the sentence that I would hear in my mind. So it was like I was speaking to like pure consciousness, and I didn't have to speak with my words. Things were automatically consciously connected to me. And so long story short, I don't want to talk too much and bore you guys, but I remember the first question I asked, I said, do I have to go back? That was my first question, because I had just had this traumatic experience of battling all of my demons, and I was in this state of bliss. I had tears running by my eyes. I kept laughing. I didn't know why. And then I asked the person, it took the body of this individual being, this guy that I know. And I remember thinking in my head, I was like, do I have to go back? And the answer was, only if you want to. And so that was a funny instance that I'll kind of explain in 1 second. And so I spent my time in this upper dimension remembering who I was. And so what I realized is that my spirit guides were all around me, and they were trying to help me remember who I was. And I'm over here like they're basically, so in this space I had access to my entire life. I had access to my entire past I could literally like think of anything in my past and then have like a full memory of it. And so basically my spirit guides spent time showing me things in my past that I didn't understand and what was really going on in the metaphysical realm. Like, okay, you remember how this happened? Yeah, this was because we were trying to show you this. And I'd be like, oh, so I'd be able to go back in time and see all those things. And essentially all those things that they were revealing to me were things that were like clues trying to remind me who I really was before I came here. And so long story short, that was my awakening. When I came back, and again, this was the beginning of my awakening. So this wasn't even my full awakened state, because when I came back from this state, this was my ego death. And so I began to completely walk in the spirit. So I had completely detached myself from everything that was earthly, and started my journey. And that's when I became a holistic healer. That's where I amplified my alchemy powers. I started getting memories coming back of me and my previous lives, learning and discovering alchemy and applying alchemy, and which is why in this life I know everything about alchemy, but I don't know how I know it. Well, I know how I know it, but I did not learn what I know about alchemy now from this present lifetime. And so pretty much I spent all this time destroying my ego. And then one day I ended up, feeling very, very drained energetically. And this is where I learned the truth about ego. I remember I was back at New Haven. It's interesting because all of my large chapters of my journey always happened at this Native American reservation in Ava, Missouri. And so I was back there, and I remember just feeling so drained of energy. And I remember I was on LSD again, and this was the last time I've ever taken LSD because what Spirit was telling me was that I'm getting to a vibrational state that is so high that if I take LSD, I will be open to just as high as the deities are on the high vibration spectrum. I will be making myself available to the lowest vibration of polarity when it comes to those entities as well. And so basically my spirit guide came to me and said, this needs to be your last time taking L, because if you take it after this point, then you will be literally entering into a danger zone where these very, very powerful low vibration beings can latch themselves onto you and you'll never even know it. So that was for someone as well. So I was taking the LSD and I was sitting by a fire and I was just sitting back looking at my life, and my spirit guide came to me and said, he said, congratulations, you found the fire. And that really resonated with me because I knew that when it was speaking to me, it was saying like, you found the fire within yourself, like, good job. But then it came to me and asked me a question. It said, okay, now that you found the fire, are you willing to leave the fire to bring other people back to the fire? Now, the reason why Spirit was asking me this question was because when I practice ceremonial magic. So when I get into open spaces with a lot of people, energy surges through me. So it was about 30 degrees outside at this ceremony, and I had nothing on. I had no clothes on. All I had was a light blanket that I had wrapped around my waist. I had no shoes on, no socks on, no shirt on, nothing, and it was 30 degrees outside. And everyone's always kind of wondering how I do that. But I know that when I get into this space, the energy of those around me kind of charges me. And so it was asking me, do you love enough to leave the fire, which I was feeling very warm around since I didn't have a shirt on or anything. It asked me, it said, are you willing to leave the fire to bring people back to the fire? Do you love that much? And I remember saying yes. And Spirit said, we'll see. And so long story short, I ended up like walking back to the car because my friend was kind of ready to go back to the church and go to sleep. And so he was like, are you ready to go back to the car? Let's go blast the heat or whatever. And I was like, yeah, for sure. So we're walking back to the car and I hear these voices around me talking to me. And they're like, what did they say? They said, they were like, oh my God, he's going to go back to the car. He's actually going to do it. And then I'm like, do what? And it's like, I'm about to turn the key in the ignition, start blasting the heat. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, what if this is a test right now? Like, what if Spirit is testing me, like seeing if I'm willing to be cold or in the name of the warmth that I'll be bringing other people to. And so like I literally heard these spirits talking about me. It's almost like they were betting on me like losing. They were like, no, he's gonna do it. And so out of nowhere, I remember like opening the car door and like just walking out into the darkness. And I ended up walking out into this open patch field. It's about 40 acres of land, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I walked out into this patch field. It was freezing outside. I had like no shoes on, so it was like dewy. So I'm walking outside, and I just stand there and I started looking up at the sky. And I remember being in like such a state of fear because I felt like, okay, if I go back to the warmth, I'm only proving that I'm not willing to be cold in this world for the people who need to be introduced to that warmth that I've already experienced. But then I was like, well, if I stay here, I could fucking freeze to death. And so I was like in this state of like stagnation, and I was so frustrated, I was so scared. Like I wasn't necessarily afraid, but I was just, I wanted to prove to myself that I really knew how to love unconditionally. So I was like, this is what maybe this is what it feels like to be fucking Jesus, like to present yourself as a living sacrifice. And so I'm standing in this space for about 30 minutes. And I remember looking up at God, and I was like, God, I fucking hate this. And me and God have been having very intimate conversations lately, me and Source. And so she was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, this is not the life that I wanted to live. I was like, I feel energetically drained. I was like, I was like, who wants to live this life where all they're doing is giving, 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 you know? And she was like, so you're saying that this isn't the life that you want to live? And I was like, no, who the fuck would want to live this way? And this was like my paradigm shift. This is what truly woke me up. She said, well, maybe if you hadn't spent all this year destroying your ego, you would know when to take care of yourself and actually enjoy life. And that was like my atomic truth bomb, just being like, psh. I was like, oh my gosh, like, so that's why you gave us ego. And she was like, indeed. And I was like, wow. So it was at that point where I realized that the ego was something that I looked at as my enemy because it had been out of balance for so long in my life that I spent all last year trying to destroy it and like basically talking shit about it, like saying like, you don't get to say so, you know, this isn't about you, you know, just sit there and be quiet, let spirit take its way, until I had nothing. And so what I had to realize was my ego is just as equal as the God in me, my spirit side, and that they actually work in unison together so that while I'm able to do my service, you know, I'm allowed, the spirit is what wants to give to everyone. The ego is what wants to keep for themselves. And so what I realized was that my true awakening came when I understood the perfect balance, because now I'm able to experience the abundance, which is having access to everything while also giving everything away simultaneously. Just knowing the timing of when to do so that I'm never without, but I'm always giving to whoever needs it. And so that was my activation. So kind of summarizing all of this, I had the beginning stages where I first started seeing the world for what it really was. And that was when I kind of woke up, you know. But then I had my Kundalini experience where I understood who I was in my previous lives and I was able to truly tap into my power. And that was my awakening. And then I had the part where I truly balanced myself out, where I was able to kind of step into neutrality. And that was my activation, because now I am fully prepared. I'm fully aware and prepared of what my mission and purpose is in this life. I know what my abilities are. It's almost like, you know, finding out that you're a superhero and, you know now what your superpowers are, and you know exactly why you were sent to this planet and how you were here to save the world in your own, you know, archetypal modality. And so that's the stage where I'm at right now. And so in this stage, this is kind of like my come up story where everything is very easy for me right now because I've deprogrammed myself from everything that is keeping me from my higher self. Fear, the only fear that I struggle with is the subconscious fear, which is the fear that I don't know that I have yet. Because there are a lot of things, like for example, when I took DMT for the first time, I didn't know that I had a fear of being powerless because I never had an opportunity where I had to be powerless. And so my strength always came from me being able to always think about what's next and to always be able to formulate plans and strategies. And that's where I put my confidence in for so long. And I remember when I first took DMT, I was so afraid of having an experience like I did when I took LSD that I had like all these spells lined out that like could ground me and anchor me into the present moment and keep me from going to those dark realms. And so I had all these expectations going into my DMT experience. And so when I first took DMT, it only lasted about 2 minutes, and like it like pushed me, almost like I felt like I opened the door, and then I saw like these sigils everywhere, and I saw this sacred geometry everywhere, and then I felt like someone pushed me out of the doors and like closed the door in front of me. And then I woke up, and when I woke up, I had this energy surging through my body that literally I was shaking the entire car that I was in. My friend was like, I've never seen this before in my life. But then as I came back out, I heard my consciousness whispered to me, and it was like, powerless. And then everyone around me was like looking to see like what my experience was. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I'm afraid to be powerless. And so that was a subconscious fear that I had. So I didn't have a fear of anything that was material. I didn't have a fear of anything that was circumstantial, but I had a fear of overall being powerless. And I had to break through that before I was ready to actually break through and experience my full DMT trip. And so that's where I had to learn that we don't have power to do anything, and we find so much power in our powerlessness. And once I realized that tomorrow I could walk out the house and get hit by a car and there's nothing I could do about it. You know, tomorrow if I wanted to, you know, go and talk to someone, that person could die tomorrow and I have no control over it. So the reality of it is we really don't have any power, but that is what makes us so powerful. Because when we realize we don't have any power, we stop trying to use power that we don't have. And by stop trying, we fall into who we are naturally supposed to be. And that's where we become most powerful. So it's like, imagine us being like a part of this human body, and imagine we are cells in this body. And it's like, imagine a cell is trying to do whatever the cell wants to do. So it's becoming like a free radical cell, which is not good for the body. And so it throws the body out of alignment. But once you can realize that you've only been making things worse by thinking that you had power, then you can relinquish that power, say, you know what, I choose to be powerless, and that will allow the body to kind of put you back into alignment with where you're supposed to be, and you realize that, oh, wait, I'm able to get and accomplish everything I want to accomplish once I realize that I don't have any power and I can just relax and let go. So that was kind of my journey after my even being activated. And so now I'm in this state of just neutrality where I'm just being open and aware in the present moment of all the ways that I could possibly evolve my state of consciousness. My work is being anchored in. I am architect of the 5D, so part of my work is being a messenger. Again, envisioning the human body, I am the mouth of the human body. So I am the middleman between consciousness and the material world that is able to anchor in messages for a lot of light workers and starseeds here. And so I've been able to fall into my role. I've been able to anchor in my alchemy abilities, where I've been able to create my entire life around me the way that I like it, where I'm not having to work a 9-to-5 job. I always have the money and funds that I need to purchase anything that I need, while I'm also working my larger spells that are anchoring in the new earth. And so, yeah, so this is where I just kind of wanted to explain this to you all today, because Spirit has been telling me that, there are a lot of people who are being very stagnant on their journey because they don't necessarily know what's next. And so you may be someone who's awake, who may know that the government is bad, the very foundational level, know that currency is bad. We know that they poison us in our foods and things like that. That's like level 1 of awakening, and then if you awaken within a certain archetype, you identify yourself as a star seed or as a light worker, then you kind of start tapping into your natural gifts and abilities, where you're like, okay, now that I know these things are designed to oppress me, let me do things to put myself in the best optimal position. So I started preparing my mind. I started watching YouTube videos on everything esoteric. I started preparing my body. I started eating only pure foods. And then I started transmuting my consciousness by removing all the mental parameters that were ever placed on me. Then I awakened, where I found out who I was in my previous lives, and I was able to bring all of that information into the present moment and allow it to just feed me information, and now I have my activation, where it's time for me to take all of that and actually start going to work. Like, I am this is like my graduate school. So this is my last incarnation here on earth. I will be ascending after this. And so this is like I'm wrapping up my grad school right now. And so this is the time where this is like my, what's it called? When you're a doctor and you have like your in-home, where you actually start going and practicing the things that you just learned. And then you kind of begin to deliver that to people who are coming up behind you. And that's the full cycle of this Earth University. And so I just wanted to kind of come on here and explain that and kind of just share that with you all. Congratulations, you guys have now heard my entire story. And so now we're like up to date on where I am on my journey. And so thank you all for being here with me. Thank you all for facilitating this space with me and allowing me to share these things with you. Let me scroll up and see if anyone has any questions or things that I might want to touch on before I wrap up. I tell my kids we are X-Men. That's actually a great analogy, and I actually use the idea of X-Men and superheroes to help people deprogram themselves. That is a great alchemy exercise to do, is envisioning yourself as a superhero and being able to imagine yourself with your powers and how you can hone in on those powers and how you can save the world, essentially, and work within your passion. So, excellent. Sexy Jesus vibes. It's funny because that's actually who. Never mind. Yes. Beautiful. Yes, thank you guys for listening. I'm chill. You guys are my tribe. And so it feels so good to just have a place where I can share this with you all and people can understand and relate and connect and also receive whatever spirit may be channeling through me. So thank you guys so much. I don't know where I'd be without you all. I love you guys. So let's see. Sabrina, peace and bliss. Ah. Thank you. Send me a good vibe. I'm not sure where I am in ascension. Can someone hit me up and chat me later? If you don't know where you are in ascension, that's normal because no one knows where they are until after they've passed it. That's the only reason why I can actually share this journey with you all is because I'm looking back on it. But there were times when I woke up that I thought I was awakened. There were times where I became awake and thought I was awakened. And even right now, it's like there is no telling if I'm actually awakened. I can only base it off my point of reference of when I wasn't awakened. And so right now, I get a very, very strong sense of like the end of my curriculum. And let me explain what this means. It's not saying that I'm done learning or that I am done, growing and evolving, but I'm caught up to where I'm supposed to be right now. I'm no longer damaged. I no longer allow my traumas to damage me and slow me down from who I'm meant to be. I have healed all those parts about me. I know who I am. I know who I was, and I know who I'm forming and who I'm creating. I understand how my thoughts manifest my reality, and I spend every day strategically architecting or designing my world. And so I'm in a very, very strong sense of control through understanding my powerlessness. And so me and the universe have been working together very, very well, very, very synonymously since this new journey in my life. And so it's kind of made me just feel like, this is kind of like the wrapping up of my curriculum, and I will become an ascending master after this. So yeah, that was very, very interesting. So I believe that is it. I love you guys. You guys are so beautiful. Peace and bliss. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me. If you guys are in need of any healing, I do alchemy healing. I can transmute any trauma within 30 minutes. That's actually a very cool thing to be able to say because it's interesting. So one of my previous lives, I was able to heal people with touch. And so after, like, it's interesting because there are certain like parts of certain texts where it says that man would do far greater than I, for I am going to be with the Father. And I didn't understand what that meant back then, but when I look at the fact that now I am able to walk people through the healing process without touching them, and I'm actually able to heal a multitude of people through a message on Facebook Live or being able to book a video appointment, it's like, oh, that's what you mean far greater, because now it's like the potential to heal is so exponential. And so that was very, very beautiful understanding for me to kind of grasp. But yes, I'm getting out here, guys. I have work to do. So I love you guys. I like you guys. I like you guys. Have a blessed evening.